And you're in New York?
I'm just outside of New York in New Jersey, yeah.
Oh, okay. And my family lives in Westchester.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're probably same distance from Manhattan, just west.
Yeah, it's like a 45, 50-minute train ride.
Yeah, same here. It's like 35 or something.
The
It's not
I want to know how to say the name of the app.
it's FarFaria.
FarFaria.
Yeah,
It's
like far, far away.
yeah, no, I got it when I read it. I was just like, I wonder how you say that.
Yeah.
And what did you come up with that idea? Did your child, or how did that happen?
No, my co-founder and I did not have our own children at the time, and so we independently, with our own wives, had children several years later. But he came up with it with one of our investors, who happens to be his cousin, and they were sort of just brainstorming, and they realized that they were in the investors' kids' playroom, and there was all these books. And this was about a little less than a year since the iPad came out. And so, there was a lot of innovation, a lot of brainstorming going on around that time of like, what is this thing actually going to get used for? And so the straw man was children's books on the iPad, right? And then, and my co-founder is somebody that I'd worked with at a previous job. And so we got to talking and sort of realized it was a good fit. He brought me on board, and then from there, together with our investors, with the team, we sort of figured out what is this thing actually going to look like? What is the business model on this new platform? What's the delivery? How do we get children's books created and and all this stuff? So, I was there for the really fun part of like figuring it all out.
Where did you meet him? At Lockheed Martin?
No, so when I was consulting at Disney, the company I worked for was Talon, and a lot of my work there was at Disney in LA. And so he was my boss actually on that project.
What's Disney in LA?
So Disney's headquarters is right outside of LA, or I guess in LA.
Disney in LA.
Yeah, Disney in Los Angeles.
I thought it was like a subsidiary of Disney, like natural
No.
language animation or something where we animate words.
No, it was Disney in Los Angeles. And so at the time it was Disney Media Group, DMG, I think it was called. So it was, their online products. And so we worked quite a bit with them. And my boss at the time, who's now my co-founder, that's how we met.
Oh, great. So it was actually your boss that's your co-founder.
Yeah. He was from San Francisco. I was from New York. We all worked in LA.
How did that relationship pivot? Was it pretty easy to pivot from being like boss and like not, or was he very like team oriented? So it was a pretty easy transition.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. I mean, he's definitely very team and people oriented. It's definitely one of his amazing qualities. He's probably going to listen to this, so I'll give him some compliments. But but yeah, but also the people who traveled in, we lived in corporate apartments, and so he and I shared a 2-bedroom apartment that the company put us up in, and so he and I just happened to spend a lot of time together. And became pretty good friends while we were there.
Well, okay, yeah, because usually a roommate, it's going to go either way. It's going to go besties or like enemies.
I've been pretty lucky.
And then what's his name?
Ajay Gadwani.
Okay, because I didn't see him for some reason. Oh, there he was. He was kind of hiding on Crunchbase. I see him now as well. Okay. And you got a third person on your team, creator Harvey.
So he's no longer with us, but yeah, okay. Harvey's, so that might be, the Crunchbase might be a little bit outdated, but Harvey also worked with us at Disney. I actually didn't know him while I was at Disney. I think he might have left right before I joined that team. But that's how he came into the fold.
So who took over those responsibilities? Did you split them up between you and your co-founder?
No, so, by the time he had left, we had a team, a bigger team at that time. And so those responsibilities were sort of split amongst some of the folks that were working for him. And so, and I love Harvey, still really great friends, but that team was able to really take it and move things forward without him.
Are you guys roommates now?
Oh no, roommates.
Oh man, oh that's so good. So the team picked up the slack. How big is your team currently?
So we're actually much smaller. We're down to 3 people, sort of on the main team, and then we work with hundreds of authors, illustrators, voice actors on an as-needed basis. We pull in development and other help as necessary. So it is much more of a lean operation than it was at some point, but it is still pretty robust.
Well, the illustrations and the interface, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's like when I see McGraw Hill and Disney and Lockheed Martin, I'm like, okay, books, graphics, technology, you were made for this.
Yeah, it's I have a younger cousin who he's in college and sort of I've been trying to get him a little more motivated and people, when you talk to people about their career path, while you're in it, you don't really realize, like when I go from Lockheed to Disney to McGraw Hill, like I wasn't like, I'm going to do this so that I can start FarFaria, right? Like things just sort of happen and you got to be open to the opportunities and weigh them as they come your way. And so I think there tends to be a logical path in hindsight, but I don't know that you can ever plan it exactly.
No, I agree. You kind of leverage your past experience when you make your next move. So then it all seems like it lines up.
Yeah. And I mean, I went to McGraw Hill and I worked in higher ed, which was nothing like I've ever done before. Like I never spent any time in higher education in publishing. And other than when I was in college, right? But at the end of the day, I got to learn a lot about the publishing world and got to meet a lot of people in publishing and understand that world. And so it was definitely good to draw upon.
Was it the same, the higher education category, computer engineering?
No, so I worked in I was project managing their digital side, or several projects on the digital side. So there's a lot of digital tools that when a college student buys a textbook, they get all sorts of digital tools. And a lot of them are cloud-based, so homework, multimedia. It's the stuff that probably, I don't know how old you are, but when you and I were in college, we probably got a CD at the back of the book.
Yeah.
That all transitioned to the web, and that's the kind of stuff we worked on.
They managed to pivot because they're like, books are going out of style. We have to pivot our content and stay relevant.
Yeah.
So they didn't do a good job?
Well, I don't know. Since I left, I don't know that I followed. And McGraw Hill specifically went through a lot of changes right after I left. Mm-hmm. They definitely had a president that came in and said, we're going to go all digital. I'm not sure how far they ended up going, because even after he was there was more changes and he had left. So yeah, I'm not sure where it sort of ended up. And I am curious. I am sort of curious, but I haven't been curious enough to look into it lately.
So this was your first time starting a company then?
Officially, yes. My first company I started with when I was in high school. A buddy of mine, we got a couple clients and we were doing sort of just tech support for very small companies. So we had like graphic designers, PR firms, real estate lawyers that we would go and basically do whatever we needed to do, whether it was running Ethernet cable or installing, at the time, I think it was a Windows 2000 server, and getting them back up and sort of whatever local IT stuff that needed to get done at the time. And then when we went to college, I think I kept one of the clients on, and just to sort of like feed my pocket. And then I don't know if he kept one of the clients. I don't remember, but that was sort of a good level of income. I could make my own hours and do some support when I needed or when they needed it. And then I was able to focus on school. So it was later when I was at Lockheed and somebody said, well, did you sell that company? I was like, you could sell that kind of company? It's like, man, I should have sold that company.
So there's, yeah, that's an opportunity to pay attention to in the future, right?
Yeah.
Little learning. What sort of big problems like came up, surprised you along the way of this second company, this FarFaria?
Um, on a, let's see, on a technology point of view. So from a technology perspective, big problems. Phew. You know, when we first were getting started and the iPad was brand new, you know, the iOS for iPad wasn't as robust as it is today. Processor memory was low, all those things. There was a lot of constraints, a lot more constraints then in 2011 than there are now doing iOS development. And so for early on, it was tough to just load a book with that has images that are really high res, that load it all into memory and have the application be stable, right?
Right.
And so um, I had to go back to my roots when I was at Lockheed, because at Lockheed I worked on air traffic control systems, and these things have to be super efficient, right? Like an air traffic control system can't just crash in the middle of an air traffic controller working with a pilot, getting them, you know, from point A to point B, literally. And so I really had to draw on some of that knowledge and techniques. And then, you know, there was lots of information out there, and I think Instagram had great posts about this kind of stuff. And so there was just sort of stability issues that I've never had to deal with, because you know, I'm dealing with, I think it was 100 megs of RAM, you know, and it was, I think one of the other interviewers, he works on satellite systems, like he was talking about 128 kilobytes of RAM. Like that's even crazier of a challenge, right?
Right.
And then we had a similar thing with audio. You know, when we then brought in the audio stuff, and later we had challenges when we started syncing up the audio with word highlights. So we had a feature where when the audio is playing, it highlights the word that the audio is speaking. And this is all, it's not computer generated audio. These are voice actors recording it. And so we had to sync these things up and get the timings. And I actually had a really fantastic developer that was an intern at the time. And he worked with me and pretty much he built this thing. But it was really cool challenge, because we had to work with third party, you know, open source stuff. We couldn't spend a lot of money on these things to get these timings, store them. How do we parse it and all that stuff? So it was good challenges. You know, we're definitely not sending rockets into space, but you know, maybe arguably you can argue more importantly, we're trying to teach kids so that they can learn eventually to send rockets into space, right?
Yeah, and that's the technical. So from the business side, what was the big thing that sticks out in your mind?
Oh gosh, from the
Everything?
business side, everything. Yeah, I mean, look, when we first started, my co-founder, his background was in technology and project management, and sort of, and he had run, he was running all of the California operations or the West Coast operations for the consulting company we were at. So he's a really great sort of operator, and he has passions for literature and art and technology, and so it was a good cross section for him. But we didn't know how to write books or get books. Like we were first thinking, all right, there's Project Gutenberg that has an archive of really old content. Can we just like hook into their API and pull stories in and then surface them through our app? And we're like, no, that's not going to work, right? Like some of these stories are not like old Grimm's Brothers stories, their originals are not something that we would find appropriate for children to teach, right? I don't know if you've ever read that stuff. So we brought on Keisha, who's our director of publishing, and she's just jack of all trades. She does so much for us. And she's a prolific writer. She figured out how to get, you know, authors, illustrators, basically built that whole process to create our own stories. And we now have 1,100 stories, and about 80% of them are books that we've commissioned, that we've had written, illustrated, and recorded all by ourselves with the help of our small crowd, as we call it. But, you know, we had to figure that out from scratch. How do we get the content? Because the big publishers are not going to just throw content in for free, you know, or for very cheap. early
and
on.
The time spent trying to make that deal happen is so significant.
Oh yeah. So, that was our first challenge, and then, growth and fundraising and finding employees, like all of these things were at the scale we were doing it, were just very new to us. So all of these independently were challenges, but at the end of the day, we communicate with the team, and we all understand how important these things are, and we try to figure them out.
Are you doing an Alexa companion app with your apps?
It's it's on the list, and my son is 3, and he talks to Alexa all the time, and so there's a part of me that is like, I just need to like hack it out, and one night stay up till 3-4 in the morning and just build something, so at the very least my son can use it. But maybe at some point we'll do it.
I think would be cool. So first you have the very easy one of just being able to pipe your audio stories through Alexa, right? Like you already have the database, you already have the API because your app, you have apps. So that's a fairly simple task to do that. And then the next one you could do is you could do like an assistive storytelling. Now, I'm not sure if I heard someone say this or if I thought it or if I dreamt it or what. So if it exists, it exists, but I couldn't find it the other night. And I imagine what it would do is, as I'm telling a story, I could make up my own story, because I do that with my daughter. I don't know if you've ever. And what I want Alexa to do is be listening to what I'm saying. And if I'm like, and it was raining and thundering, and then it would be like, it would be reading the text and then be playing rain and thunder sounds.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a fun idea.
And then a stampede of horses, and you hear, like,
that could be really fun.
Like a little background assistance, a little layup from Alexa on your story.
Right. That's pretty cool. I'm going to write that one down.
Thanks. Yeah, let's do it. I'll be super pumped. I would use it because I thought about it and I couldn't remember if somebody said it or if I heard it or what. And then I went the other night and I spent about 25 minutes searching for it, like in the Alexa skills and all that. Couldn't find it. I like Google for it. I was like, I went on Google. I went directly into the skills. I went like everywhere, and I'm like background assistive audio story, like, help me tell a story, or like story audio or story audio companion. I'm like searching all these terms and nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, this is like, remember when I was in college, there was all these like soundboard websites where you could just like play, right? So play sound effects. So it's probably not that hard in theory.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was super pumped, because there's like only so many general things, like background things, like descriptive words. I'm sure you get a dictionary of them and then go hunt down sound effects for them. So
yeah, it can be fun.
Yeah, well, let me know if you do, because then I'm going to be telling stories to Arian with that.
Will do.
What's your day-to-day look like other than running off and checking into this Alexa idea?
Yeah. So, it's very different. We're actually we're exploring a whole new product that we're not really ready to talk about. And, we might get to the point where we find out it's a terrible idea and we'll shut it down. So right now, today, we're spending a lot of time exploring this product and seeing if it's a good idea, prototyping, stuff like that. But it really varies. Like we get partnerships every once in a while, and so sometimes I have to do some work to service that partnership. If there's new content, board meetings and working with my team on various things. So it really, I wish I could say my day-to-day looks the same every day, but every day is pretty different. Right now with the new thing we're working on, it is prototyping. It's learning, new APIs and technologies that we haven't worked with in the past to see if those are worthwhile actually working with and integrating. And it's talking to prospective customers to see if this is a good idea or what are the customer needs.
Well, let's talk about it. What is it?
Sure. Well, I'm not ready to talk about it, but what I will say is it serves the same audience of sort of parents with young children.
It's the Alexa companion app.
Maybe.
You pretended to write it down as if like, oh, this is a new idea, and then you're gonna get off the call and be like, team, we gotta get it out today.
Maybe.
Yeah. Or maybe that's the pivot. Maybe you show up in the meeting and you're like, all right, we're still working on this customer value, and then you bring that up and everyone's like, jaws hit the floor.
Well, they better be listening to this live on Facebook, right? So they should be ahead of me.
They'll have a prototype by the end of the call.
Yeah. That would be amazing.
So every single day is different. Are you are you writing code at all?
Yeah. I mean, we're right now, especially because we're working on prototype. Like I'm primarily the one working on it, and so excuse me. I'm definitely writing more code right now than I was 6 months ago. For instance, like before, we were still making updates to the app, mostly on iOS. That's kind of where the majority of our audience is. So again, and that changes. You know, when we had a slightly bigger team, I was writing a lot less code because I had a great development team doing it, and it sort of didn't make sense for me to write as much anymore. So it ebbs and flows depending on what's going on with the company, with the team, with demand and stuff like that.
So have you looked at React Native at all?
Sorry?
Have you looked at React Native at all?
You know, I've been listening to your podcast and I've talked, and I have not yet. We've not, for existing applications, I don't know that it makes sense for me to sort of rewrite right now for, but I think with this new thing, it's definitely on the list of things to look at. It's actually, the new thing seems like it's probably going to be web first, not mobile first. And so it's unclear to me yet if and when we're going to go mobile, but I feel like when we do, we will most likely, at least prototype some things in React Native. But I mean, I've heard your praises for it, so I think it definitely is high up on the list of options.
Yeah, I mean, 75% code-based reuse. Like, how can you not love it? It's like, thank you, Facebook, thank you, Instagram, and you can, all their developers write about it too. So you go like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've been very wary of some of these cross-platform mobile platforms, and I feel like they're always a step or two behind the actual native platforms, and the experiences have not been great. But I've used some of these React Native apps, and you can't really even tell the difference anymore. And I think it depends, right? Like for FarFaria, it's especially when we were building it, it's a very immersive experience. There's high graphics, stuff like that. And so that's a little tougher to achieve on a cross-platform thing. But for something that's a scroll displaying, graphs and displaying images and text and what most apps are, I think it makes a lot more sense, especially given how much, how far React has come. So, and how popular it's become.
Oh yeah. And then it's, it is the Facebook app. It is the Instagram app. It is Airbnb. All those apps are React Native.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like,
it's gotten a lot of community support, right? So that's helpful.
Yeah. I like to look at where the billion-dollar companies are putting their bets and their resources. Cause that's where you get in trouble. Where these other platforms, well, when the ones that have claimed to be cross-platform, there's always like the subdivisions of, there's many cross platforms and they all try to do it a different way. The way that React Native went about it, it's logical, but the other thing that gives me comfort and that caused me to look at it is when their systems are dependent on it and they have that much cash, the project's not going to go anywhere. Look at the other companies that were trying to do cross platforms. They were trying to make that business a business. They were trying to make servicing that cross platform the business. It would be open, but they would build, like support and advanced solutions on top of it, so that was the whole business. So if they went out of business, no one's maintaining it.
Right, totally. And I think React is specific to a billion-dollar company, but even Ruby on Rails with Basecamp, like they were a tiny company, and they still were able to do just that, right? Like they built their business on Ruby on Rails, and they built up Rails as they built their business. And look at how far it's come. So I'm not sure that it has to be a billion-dollar company, but I think it has to be with commitment to build up the platform. And I think building the platform on the back of their company is a big, and their own product is a big advantage for the platform.
Yeah, I had Ryan Singer on the show, and I still haven't checked out their new JavaScript library. I feel kind of bad about that. Did you hear that episode?
I did not. I queued it up, but I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh yeah, he's the main engineering guy at Basecamp, apparently, DHH, and I'm forgetting the other guy. They kind of let him he's kind of fairly in charge of the product, I guess.
Oh, cool.
That's the way to say. I'm backing out of the statement because I'm unsure. Hashtag
cool.
real talk. All right, yeah. So, but he was telling me they were all pumped up about this new JavaScript thing that they were doing, and I looked at the the one page of it, and I never got to dig into it, and I just thought of that. So I'm gonna go play with that this afternoon.
Awesome. Yeah, I got to check that out.
So you guys, you've been around for a while. And
Yeah.
it looks like you got some upfront venture money, but it doesn't look like you've raised subsequent rounds. Are you guys making money?
Yeah, I mean, we've been cash flow positive for a couple of years now, and sort of self-sufficient. So our investors are pretty happy with that. Yeah, I was talking to somebody that then the other day, and they're like, "Well, are you still a startup?" And I was like, it's a great question. I'm not really sure.
No,
Right?
you're
Like
a
we still run
business.
as a
Yeah.
startup. Yeah, we're a business. So we're pretty proud of having been able to build a business that is self-sustaining and pays our bills and does a lot of good in the world. So, are we Uber? No, but I'm definitely pretty proud of what we're doing. And the goal is to sort of continue building things that empower people, that help people, and we can build a business out of.
Oh, it's solid. I like hearing that. I always love when it happens, when the companies don't raise 20 rounds and they make cash and then they lean up so that they can actually sustain it and then survive and then strategize on how to grow even farther. Those are the companies that tend to do very well in the end.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I think for for some companies it may make sense to raise a whole bunch of money and go extra bold. And for some companies it doesn't. And some companies think they're in one camp but they're actually in the other. So um, out of necessity or out of virtue, like we are where we are, and we're pretty happy with where we're going right now. So would I love an extra 20 million bucks in the bank? Sure, but
Well, me too. I'll stand in that
yeah,
line.
yeah. So no complaints.
So, are you doing any speaking? Like, do you go around and talk about what you're doing at conventions? Have you ever thought about it? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, I guess I've thought about it. I've done a few speaking engagements. I have had a talk or two about um, I think I called it the One Developer Dev Shop. And so I did a talk at like one of these boot camps at my old college. They have a coding boot camp now. I did it at a couple of Techstars education accelerators. Um, and so I've given this talk, and the idea is that when we first started out, we didn't have very much money. We had to spend a bunch of money on building content. And so we didn't hire any developers. And basically, we had a little bit of help from an outside consultant getting to launch. But through launch and beyond for a little while, we didn't hire any developers. And so the idea is that like you can get to revenue, build a product that starts generating revenue without a huge development team or without even a bigger development team. And certainly there's pros and cons, but there's with the cloud, with Heroku, with Circle CI, there's all these platforms now that enable lone wolf developer to effectively act as an enterprise team. And some of that is being able to just go a little bit slower than you might with a 2, 3, 5 person team. But some of that is also, you're still able to achieve a lot of these things, spend less, get to revenue. And then you got to be creative, right? Like we didn't have a QA team, we didn't have a QA. So we built a process where we called it Break It Fridays, or like break it sessions before we did a release to the App Store. And what that was we got the whole company on a call because we were bi-coastal. My co-founder and larger part of the team is in San Francisco, and I'm New York based, and we had a team here. And so we would get on a call, and everybody installs the latest version on their iPad and goes to town. And part of it is, all right, everybody, I need you to test this area of the app where we did development on, and then it's, hey, we're gonna have 4 and 5-year-old kids, so just go and break this app. Like go and try to crash it, try to pretend, bring your inner child out and try to just break the thing, because that's what our users are going to be doing. And so that was a big
I like it.
Breaker Fridays. And it was, we didn't have a QA team, but we got, 5, 10 people to jump on this thing and try to destroy it. And, crashes were coming in real time. We were able to ask, hey, Joel, what did you do to cause that crash that I just saw come in?
Did nothing. I didn't do anything.
Yeah. So, and so we were able to move pretty quickly to fix and keep quality pretty high. Certainly bugs still made it through production, of course, as always. But I think we were able to get creative with a very tiny development team.
So let's say I'm in your app, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Getting a story, words, highlights following. Maybe it's like the princess physicist or something like that, right?
Sure, yeah.
Going forward, I'm like, oh, great story. At the end of the story, boop, 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 little screen comes up, and I can order a princess physicist onesie for my daughter, or I can order a copy of the physical book, or I can order you guys a sticker or something. You guys have that stuff?
So we did play with merch through like Shopify, and that never really took off. We didn't really promote it a whole lot in the app, and a lot of our app usage is done with the child by themselves. So we try not to get a little, once you get over, I think 4 or 5 years old, the kids are able to be pretty independent, and especially with the voiceover, right? If they know how to hit the play button, my son is 3 years old. He knows how to hit the play button. Like
now you got to put a purchase button there.
Let's
make it sparkly.
Well, we try not to exploit kids too much.
Just a little bit though. That's okay. A little bit.
Yeah, before they've subscribed, maybe. But yeah. So we've tried to play with that. On the print book side, we've explored that as well. And we're talking to a couple of partners to see if that's how we can make that happen. So it's on the list somewhere, but we haven't really. We've dipped our toes to see what we can do there. We had another partner. I think they were called Storyweaver, where they actually turned our books into like custom books. So we had a book, and they changed the character, and you can put like your own name, your own kid's name in it, and get it printed. Oh, cool. Yeah, so that that did some stuff, and that was pretty cool.
That's what Alexa has. She has a story thing that you can do where you actually give it the name and it does that.
Yeah, so there's definitely some opportunities, and there's some cool stuff going on with that.
Yeah, it's hard to focus on all that, like product and all this stuff on FarFaria when you're so busy building this assistive storytelling next generation Amazon Alexa skill.
Right.
In secret, in top secret, Lockheed Martin style. There's code, there's doors, there's even smoke, like big secret. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even allowed to bring my iPhone in because there's a camera on it.
There you go. I actually have a friend, Jeff, and he's actually on the board of the charity. The charity. So he works with a government contractor, and they build embedded systems and stuff like that. And he was asking, we were talking one day because he came to my wedding, and we were talking about like building apps and stuff. He's like, oh, I have so many great ideas for apps. The only thing is we have lockers. You can't bring them inside the facility.
Right.
Like you can't, it's a no device facility.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know how people deal with it. I left Lockheed, I think 2007, and it was right when the iPhone came out. And I didn't even have one when I left, but the people had camera phones. And when the iPhone came out, they stopped, at least for a while, they stopped letting people bring camera phones into the building. Like you had to leave it in your car or something. And this was not one of the more top secret facilities either. I mean, we had low level clearances for most things, but it was still a concern. I should ask some of my friends, because I know like at least one of my friends that still works there. I think now he has an iPhone as his work phone instead of like a BlackBerry. So I'm sure they've either solved it or ignored it since then.
So if Walt Disney, Walt Disney's gonna call you up to say, I love what you're doing with FarFaria, and he's only gonna sue you for like 3 different patent infringements. So calls you up and he says, I want you to come to my imagination station, which I'm assuming is something that exists, and you're gonna get to go in to a time machine and go back to yourself 10 years ago, give yourself some advice. What would it be?
So let's see. So and then it's tied to FarFaria
No,
specifically,
it's
or
tied to
okay,
life, like anything life. Like
yeah,
you'd be like, don't step on that subway or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. So no, 10 years ago, 2008, which was a tough economic year, but I think it would have been just dive in and start your own thing sooner, right?
Ooh, nice.
It's um, don't wait for the time to be right. Back then, like I felt like I was still learning a lot of technology and I wasn't ready to sort of chart my own path yet. Like I was still sort of leveraging the jobs I was working on to learn whether it was management or whatever the case may be, right?
Mhm.
And my velocity of learning, you know, went to escape velocity once I started this business. And so what I would have told my 10-year younger self is that if you think you want to keep learning by working for somebody else, the actual way to keep learning is to work for yourself and build an actual business. And so start now, don't wait.
I love it. Because I mean, you got to go out and actually do it. You got to stand up to fall down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and there's times where my parents are like, "Are you ever going to go and get your master's degree and get your MBA?" And very arrogantly, I would say like, I can probably teach some of those classes with all the things I've learned. Like I'm sure there's lots of things that I don't know, but I've learned a lot of what I need to do to put in practice. Um, and I'm a pretty practical guy, right? Like I don't live in theory very much. Like I live in very much what is the right thing to do right now and try to learn that.
Mhm.
And so that was my default response, arrogantly, to say never, because
Well,
I can teach
here's
it.
one for you. This is what you should do. Write a book, publish the book, send free copies to every professor on the topic at every university in the entire United States and any English speaking country. Then, when that book gets picked up by inevitably one of them and they teach part of your content from that book on another individual's master's degree, take a copy of that individual's master's degree and send it to your parents. Be like, this individual got their master's degree by learning my content.
That's a fantastic idea.
Hashtag
I'm
satisfied, right?
gonna,
What
I'm
we
gonna
do.
do that right after I finish this Alexa
Woo!
app.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been an awesome call.
Awesome, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, did we get the audio from